Welcome back to IPS Live, the official podcast for Inside Pack Sports. Today, we're talking NC State men's basketball. We've not posted a podcast on our platform in a while now, so we're going to do it today. A lot of big news. We've covered it on the website. We've been putting some stuff up on YouTube as well. As always, if you're visiting us at YouTube at Inside Pack Sports, make sure you subscribe. Jake McSwain with me. And Jake, let's jump into it. Basketball, the podcast. The biggest news. What's the big news that we need to open this with for you? If there was one topic you could kind of lead with, what would it be?
Man, I feel like talking about the rotation is where we can turn it. You know, we've gotten to a point now where the roster seems to be set in stone. Like, we know the pieces that NC State's going to have next year. We've had some. Man, it's funny, the discussions along the way have gone from, you know, if they get this guy and how does the rotation look, and even last week we were talking about it. So it seems like, hey, we've had some good discussion around the rotation. I know it's a hot button issue for some folks. Might be a good opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, I was thinking about this yesterday. You remember back when NC State was on Michael and Woko, the transfer big, and State was linked to him, and you end up getting Ven-Allen, Lubin, and Paul Embayas, right? It's just timing of these things matter so much on when to strike with the portal, and I think State, they did such a really good job at that. It's put them in a position to have a top 20 roster, right? And I think when you look at this team, that's where it starts with, is the overall depth of this roster.
Yeah, it is super deep. And I think it's going to be interesting because I think on like the forums and when you see people talking about this, there's so many questions that are out there around, well, who's playing more between Breed, McNeil, and Abel? And, you know, how does the 5 minutes shake out? And I think it's with your NC State, you have so many options. I mean, it wouldn't shock me. And when I'm talking about possibilities, there's 4 or 5 different ways, you know, all of that could resolve itself. So I'm not sure what the coaching staff is going to do. I'm sure in the early part of the season, there's going to be some experimentation that goes on there and they try to find out what works and what doesn't. But at the very least, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, my eyes opened wide there a little bit. While you were talking, I was on social media and got a notification of a tweet from NC State men's basketball that had a video clip of Matthew Abel making some plays. And I want to start with him. I mean, I didn't feel like I would, but I do, because to me, he's maybe the one player that we feel like could potentially be in the rotation that I think has the widest range of outcomes, because he's a guy who I wouldn't be totally shocked if he came in and had a Trequavion Smith type impact as a freshman, because he's that talented.
Mm-hmm.
But I also could see him having a Paul McNeil type year where he plays very little at the beginning of the season and maybe down the stretch he carves out some sort of role. I think there's just a wide range of outcomes for him. If you watch those couple of clips, you can see why NC State's so excited about it.
Yeah, I think maybe my expectations are a little more tempered from like accounting stats. I have a hard time seeing him performing like Trequavion Smith did as a freshman, just because I don't think he can do as much with the ball in his hands. But I think when you talk about having a role that allows him to impact the success of NC State next year, like, he could have an even bigger impact if he really pans out well. Because I think from his shooting perspective, like, he could be NC State's best shooter next year, or like on a pretty good volume, he could be that guy. Or he could, you know, if he can play defense well, like, and impact both ends of the court, then that's a role that he could step into. But to your point, if guys emerge around him, like if a Paul McNeil emerges or Alyn Breed is as good as we think he could be, and Will Wade probably thinks he is, then yeah, he could be a guy that struggles to get minutes. But I think with NC State next year, it's important to remember there's going to be guys who might not get as many minutes as they could elsewhere, or as maybe their level of play dictates they should get, because we're going to have options and we're going to have guys that can play. And maybe it's, I don't think like, I've seen people say on the boards, man, that like, oh, the first, you know, time Embayas, you know, doesn't get a bunch of rebounds, or Ven-Allen Lubin gets out rebounded, people are going to start calling for more Embayas. And to an extent that might be true, but I think State's going to be good enough to where you have less of that next year.
Yeah. Let's start at that position. Let's start at center, because I think what you brought up there is very interesting to me because sure, you may look at it and say Ven-Allen Lubin's not rebounding the basketball as you would, because let's be honest, Jake. At 6'8", 230 pounds, he's already going to get dinged as being as a rebounder by the fan base,
Yeah.
right? Because you're just going to assume, well, he can't rebound. He can't play the 5 and rebound. He's 6'8", 230 pounds. Yeah, that might be frustrating to people at times, but the counter to that would be, what if you go with a Paul Mbaya and he's a 0 offensively because he's raw, and he struggles at the free throw line, and he struggles finishing around the hoop. I think the rebounding worries would kind of be the least of my concerns at that point, right? So I think there's multiple ways you can look at it, and that's why I like what they've done at that position, because while we both would agree Paul Mbaya has maybe as big a ceiling as any player on state's roster, I don't know really what the floor is. Because if you looked at his splits on the international level from when he played down, I think with the under 19, under 21 team he was with, and compare it to when he had his pro experience, the numbers were drastically different. And so I think there's going to be a learning curve for Mbaya to where I feel like if we're projecting out this lineup right now, you got to start with Ven-Allen Lubin and then kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, and I think I've said all along, I think that's a likely outcome, just given the unsureness around Mbaya being available early in the season. But I just think you talk about the floor with Mbaya, and for me, it's a question of, I don't see how what he does really well doesn't translate, because you're looking at a guy who's so long and so physical that the rebounding is, I think, going to be there. I have a hard time envisioning a world where Paul Mbaya steps in and struggles to get rebounds, or Paul Mbaya steps in and struggles to get putbacks or catches around the rim and dunk them. Like, I don't know. I just think for me, the likelihood of him having that level of exacerbated troubles is small. So for me, like, it's kind of a similar story to what I was saying with Breed, McNeil, and Abel, is that ultimately I think you could see Mbaya playing himself into a bigger role. But at the end of the day, I mean, even if you're looking at a just true timeshare split where each guy's getting around 50% of the minutes, I mean, that's fine. I think you're fine with that. And you might steal some from the 4, steal some from like a guard and shift Williams down. The opportunity is going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, you're in good hands there. I mean, you've got an upside player. You've got that's young. You've got an experienced veteran. We talked a lot when we were up in the air on if State would still be able to keep him by. We talked a lot about finding minutes for Jerry Dean there. You still have that option.
I still think they use it.
Yeah, I mean, you still have that option as well to maybe get him 3, 4, 5 minutes a night at the center position. Let's just go to power forward. We posted on the YouTube channel and on the website here on Tuesday an offensive film room on Darrion Williams. And I think that's our expectation, right? This is a guy you plug and play 30 minutes a night, and he's going to be one of the best players in the ACC.
Oh, yeah. I think, 30 minutes a night, you got to pencil that in for him right now. I would be cautious to say that it probably won't be 30 minutes at the power forward position, but he will get around 30 minutes. I think Jerry Ding provides you such a spark at that role. From everything I've seen from him and the type of shooting he's going to bring, it's funny. We've talked about starting lineup predictions and when things were a little more fluid. And I think now where it seems pretty obvious Ding is going to come off the bench. I mean, I know some folks think Williams will start off at the 3 some nights, but I tend not to see that as much. I do think that, he's somebody that pairs really well with Mbaya coming off as a second unit. So, like, you're going to have some spacing because, hopefully Ven-Allen Lubin can get back to Vanderbilt days where he's shooting 1 or 2 attempts a game, but Mbaya is not going to do that. So having a 4-man that is going to be a legitimate floor spacer and like a knockdown shooter, I think that helps out the offense a lot.
How important do you think it is to find minutes for Jerry Ding?
I think really important. I mean, he might be NC State's most proven shooting threat outside of Darrion Williams. I mean, Tre Holloman's right there with him, but I think you need to have that type of player that can come in and provide a spark from the perimeter, provide some spacing for your other pieces, especially depending on who that first person is coming off. Because, you know, we'll get to it when we get to the one and talk there. But I think Whittier Copeland is shaping up as your kind of backup offense initiator. And he's a guy that can't shoot the ball very well. So what helps him out a lot is when you have a guy like Jerry Ding on the court at the same time who can do some pick and pop stuff, has athleticism to like occasionally roll as well and catch some good finishes. I mean, I think it's going to be really important just because he makes life easier for all the other folks that are going to be playing in kind of that second unit.
Yeah, you talked about Holloman shooting and Williams shooting. I think the difference to me with Ding is he knows that's his role. There's when you have complete confidence from your staff and your teammates to shoot the basketball, there's a different level of aggression there. And hunting out that 3-point shot, you need guys who are willing to push it from a volume standpoint. And there may be games where, you want to get Jerry Ding around 10 attempts in a game. It's high, but when you extend his minutes maybe a night and you can kind of keep him out there, I think that's the when you're talking about bringing him off the bench, Jake, that's a guy who to me is going to be really, really an X factor for State this year because he can have games where, maybe he scores 3 points. But there's also going to be nice where he could give you 18 and just completely change a basketball game for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think establishing that role early is going to be somewhat of a priority for the staff too. Because, I mean, you're going to have to figure out where he's comfortable and him coming in and understanding kind of what that role is going to look like. And that's the case for most of these guys, though, too, to be honest. I mean, they're all new coming into a new system, except for one guy who is coming off of an injury. So be interesting.
Small forward, Terrance Arceneaux comes in from Houston. We feel like he's going to probably have the inside track there. But still, you've got a bunch of different options. You talked about maybe playing Darrion Williams there some. We've talked about maybe you can play Arceneaux at the 2 if you want to. You've got guys like Quadir Copeland, Paul McNeil, Matthew Abel, all can factor in at that position. For you, and if you want to go ahead and lump the 2 in with this and say we include Alyn Breed in there as well, is this where you feel like the most competition is on the roster for NC State right now at the 2 and 3 positions?
Yeah, it's where you seem like you have the most guys with undefined roles. So it's like they're going to be competing. So between those 2 spots, you have 80 minutes a night, right? So, I mean, I feel pretty comfortable saying, barring injury, Arceneaux is going to have a spot, and he's going to have something that's baked in from a minutes perspective for him because defensively, what he brings you is pretty elite. So it's going to help you out a lot there. Then, so for the sake of exercise here, James, let's call that 25 minutes a night, at least somewhat conservatively, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that takes you down to 55 minutes. And so then between Abel, McNeil, Breed, and I feel like I'm missing on one. And if you want to throw
Abel,
Copeland in there, maybe, but we'll talk about him. He can get some minutes from some other spots, but so then you start talking about 65 minutes between, or sorry, no, that would be 55 minutes between 3 guys. And if one of them asserts themselves, I'll say I think it's going to be Alyn Breed, at least from the beginning. If they assert themselves and they're getting 25 minutes a night, then you're talking about 20 minutes or so split between at a minimum 2 players, and you have to think Williams is going to slot down some. So we'll even just say he can super conservatively. He's playing 5 minutes a game there, right? So then you're down to 15 minutes between those 2 guys, and it's and maybe that shifts, and maybe it's Abel that asserts himself. Then it's McNeil and Breed who are kind of duking it out for those 15 minutes, and it's hard to imagine, James. I know you'll have something to say about this, but it's hard to imagine having 2 guys splitting 15 minutes and being effective doing that.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it because I think this is the area where we're talking about getting to 9 or 10 on your roster, right? Because when we get done doing this breakdown, I think you'd agree with me. Whichever big is not starting is essentially your 6th man. We know Jerry Ding's playing. That's 7. Quadir Copeland's playing. That's 8. So those 15 minutes you're talking about is I mean, I wouldn't want to split them between two players. I'd try and give somebody a chance to have a real role,
Yeah.
right? Because that was my issue last year with NC State is it just felt at times like guys were put in positions where you never had enough continuity or consistency to have a real role, especially at the back end of the rotation. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think 9 guys, we'll see how it plays out. But you're right. I mean, this is where the minutes come. But the thing is to remember for everyone, it always works itself out a lot of times. Like to me,
Mm-hmm.
NC State's season last year felt like such an anomaly where you were playing 12 guys for some reason. Like guys are going to get injured. Someone might get injured, sprain an ankle, whatever, miss a little time. Someone's just going to completely go out and win a role that we feel like's a battle or,
Mm-hmm.
that's a competition. I go back to, Mo Diarra, 2 years ago, where it was kind of like Dennis Parker and Mo. Then you had MJ Rice thrown into it, and there was a bunch of kind of back and forth for most of that year. Then pretty much all of February and the rest of the year, Mo Diarra was playing 30 plus minutes a night, right? He just kind of won the role. So
Yeah.
it'll work itself out. But right now, I do think that's those two guys. When you look at Abel and you look at McNeil, they're competing for time. I just wonder, and this is kind of why I led with Abel earlier. What if he's just too talented?
Yeah. And that's possible.
Right.
That's totally possible.
Right. Yeah. What if he's just, we know State likes Alyn Breed, Quadir Copeland, upperclassmen. But what if he's just too talented? It's certainly possible. I mean, I think that's something to consider. Point guard, Tre Holloman, hell, right behind Darrion Williams is probably the safest role on the roster. I mean, I would think like maybe you could see somebody pushing him if State wants to get aggressive and move maybe a Breed to the on-ball role. But
Yeah.
still, the expectation is he's opening the year as the guy.
And it's probably another, 26 to 28 minutes minimum. You know what I mean? Like he's a guy that's going to play a lot of minutes.
Behind him, you had Quadir Copeland.
I think so. I think it's got that, or like you mentioned, Alyn Breed. But I think Copeland's a guy that's going to play, and he was comfortable getting used as a ball handler. So I think that's somebody that's a role that's projectable for him, and you got to find minutes for him somewhere. So I think that makes sense more than anything else.
So we've gone over the roster here, or the projected lineup. I wanted to, before we get going, I wanted to bring up an article that I saw here on Wednesday. We're taping this here Wednesday afternoon. This is from Evan Maya at evanmaya.com. Does great analytical work over there. He actually sent me this on Twitter, sent me a DM with this link in it because he had some stuff in there on NC State. And we were just discussing it back and forth. And he's really high on what Will Wade has done with this roster. So according to his metrics, he has NC State's roster ranking in the 5 to 20 range nationally. And offensively, 10 to 19, defensively, 17 to 24. So overall, offensively and defensively, Jake, he considers this a top 25 roster nationally based on his metrics with a ceiling as high as 5.
Mm-hmm. That sounds about right. I mean, that sounds about right to me. But I was curious what you thought.
Well, it's funny looking at so he's got a breakdown in here of offensive box score player rating, defensive box score player rating, and then overall. And I think he's got, I'm looking at it right now, 6, 9. So he's got 12 scholarship players listed. He doesn't have Jamie, the Finnish kid. Again, Jake, I'm not going to butcher his name, so I won't even attempt to try it. But he doesn't have him listed here. So he's got 12 guys listed. And in order of overall BPR, he has Alyn Breed 10th.
Yeah.
And we've talked some about this, about the upside of how Breed can maybe push this roster. Like if you're trying to say, how does this roster get to 5 in this 5 to 20 range? He's got him with a lower, BPR than Matthew Abel, Paul McNeil, Paul Embayas, Jerry Dean, Quadir Copeland. He's got him only ahead of Zamichael Wilkins and Colt Langdon. So he's telling you, based on his system, he's projecting out Alyn Breed to be State's 10th best player.
It's not surprising, especially when you talk about a metric site like Maya, because if he's going off metrics, then what are you going on for Alyn Breed? You know what I mean? Like it
Mm-hmm.
makes complete sense. But what should make people super excited about that is, man, he projects us as that type of team with nothing coming out of somebody that we project as, I mean, a top 5 player for NC State.
Yeah, starter. I
Yeah.
mean, I think he could be as high as 3 for NC State.
Yeah.
In terms of offensive role, like if he plays a role similar to what he played at McNeese his first couple of games, and you're pairing him with Darrion Williams, he could be right behind Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the ceiling for Alyn Breed, is if they truly believe he's their best on-ball guard in terms of creating offense and scoring. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if that were to happen. The other thing I wanted to point out about this article, he also broke it down without Darrion Williams to give you the impact that he
Yeah.
feels like Darrion Williams is making on this team. And so if you take Darrion Williams' metrics and numbers out of the breakdown, that roster range goes from 5 to 20 to 33 to 39.
I believe that. Because you're counting on so much. Like, and it's funny, I put something on our board, on our premium boards, that broke down what you normally get from transfer pieces and the amount of times that you see, or like what's the typical outcome for someone who brings a transfer in. And I used every person that's gone through the transfer portal for the state of North Carolina schools. And I'll have a video coming out on my channel about this. But spoiler alert, I mean, you don't often see huge jumps in production. Guys are generally around where they were, and then you'll get a couple cases that are outliers of where guys really hit, right? And so if you were to take Darrion Williams out of the equation and you start talking about NC State as a top 20 team, for that to happen, you're counting on growth from multiple pieces. I mean, you're talking about you need Alyn Breed to be as good as we think he is, to be that good of a team, or you need Terrance Arceneaux to live up to some hype and be a much better offensive player. But Darrion Williams solves problems. You bring him in, you don't have to have that anymore. If Terrance Arceneaux is what he is, then cool. Or if Alyn Breed's a useful rotation player, but that's about it at the ACC level, then fine. That's okay. So that makes a lot of sense to me that Williams has that type of impact when you start talking about it from a pure stats driven perspective, because he's just a 3-year proven scorer, has won some kind of accolade at the end of every season he's been in, whether it be a rookie of the year or a named team of the season for whatever conference he was in, Big 12 being the one last year. So I get it.
What is your biggest concern with NC State men's basketball right now?
I'll actually want to answer that and I'll kind of turn the question back on you for a second, because
Okay.
I was thinking about this in my head just now. When you see sites like that say NC State could be a top 10 team, let's take NC State out of it for 1 second. And when you think of a top 10 team, a year in and year out, having watched a lot of college basketball, what are some of the traits that you think a top 10 team needs to have? Like, what are things that you expect to see from top 10 teams? In fact, for me, I'll start it off. The one thing, like, obviously, I think to be a top 10 team, you have to have a bona fide star player. Like, you don't see a top 10 team full of good, solid rotational pieces. Hold on, James. I got you. You cut out for a second. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think you need a stud, right? Like, you need a guy going to be a stud for you. And so for me, that's where, when you look at it from NC State's perspective, the ceiling, that's why they are, I think, a 5 to 20, right? Because that was the other thing in that article that I meant to brought up that Evan pointed out, was I gave you the range, but think about the variance in the ranges, right? Including Williams, it was 5 to 20. Williams, it was 33 to 39. So that's a much smaller range of outcomes taking him out, because you're thinking with him, he could potentially elevate you to another level. And so I think for NC State, that's where it starts. Now, to me, in terms of concern, I would say maybe handling the expectations. We know at NC State, there's been years, Jake, you've seen it, where they've come into seasons with high expectations and not live up to it. And I think you and I both know this. State's not sneaking up on anybody this year with Will Wade as head coach.
Yeah,
I don't think NC State's sneaking up.
No. I think that NC State's going to have to be able to live up to that. And it's going to be interesting. But I think, I made the point before, you look at the pieces that they have in the fold now, and you've built a starting lineup of guys who are on kind of top 6 seed teams last year. So it's like you got the point guard from a 2 seed, you got the wing from a 3 seed, like the best player or one of the best players in Texas Tech's roster last year in Darrion Williams. You got a key player from McNeese State who won a game in the NCAA tournament. You got a guy that was a very critical defensive piece for a 1 seed, right? I mean, dang, like you got guys that aren't afraid of that, if that makes sense. Like that's how they were playing last year. Like Michigan State wasn't sneaking up on anybody, Houston wasn't, Texas Tech, they were all known quantities, and Darrion Williams is used to being treated like Darrion Williams. So I think that eases that concern for me a little bit.
There you have it. We wanted to discuss NC State men's basketball a little bit on this IPS Live podcast. We haven't been able to get together to tape one here. If you want to, you can also check it out on YouTube. As always, subscribe at Inside Pack Sports on YouTube. So for this edition of IPS Live, the official podcast for Inside Pack Sports, my name is James Henderson. Joining me tonight, Jake McSwain. Make sure you join us again next time.